video as part of the third in the series of demonstration videos for B04 Introduction to Python, where here we're going to look at conditional statements. So there's an example in the worksheet where we're looking at some variable called x, and we're saying that if x is greater than 5, we're going to print it out. So you can see that in line 3. Let's define x. So I'm going to call x, I'm going to assign that value 6. So we just define x here. We're saying if x is greater than 5 with a colon at the end. And the colon means that this is a special statement that is conditional. And then we're going to print out if the above is true. So remember that this evaluation is either true or false. If it is true, this line on line 6 will be executed. If it is not true, we will go down to line 7. So just put a print function there, end of script. So you can see it moving down there. So let's try running this. So it will take x here. It'll evaluate to see if that is true. If it is true, it'll print this out, and then it will print end of script. We can even put x at the start of this print statement if we want. So let's run this now. So you can see 6 is greater than 5 is printed out on line 6, and then prints out line 8 on the end of the script. If we change this to 4, let's see what happens. It just prints end of script. So skip this line on line 6. It evaluated it as false, and nothing happened. If we change this criteria to be x greater than 3 or any kind of value like that, we can then run this in the same way as before and see what happens. It says 4 is greater than 5. Obviously, the if statement should be changed to greater than 3, but now it worked because we changed the evaluation criteria. If we say x is less than 3 now, and run it when we have x is equal to 4, nothing happens, it doesn't print it out. If we change that x to be minus 999 and print it, run this, we see that this is less than 3, and thus line 6 is printed out because that evaluates as true. So we can make this more advanced and let's say add in an else statement. So else statements we just add in with a colon at the end, and then to print, what we could say is that x is greater than or equal to 3. So let's see what happens here. We'll change x to be 9 and run this. So we see that 9 is greater than or equal to 3. So line 8 is printed out, and line 6 is not printed out. So either this would be printed out on line 6 if it is true. If it is not true, then line 8 will be printed out. If we change x now to be minus 3, run through again, we see that line 6 is executed. We see minus 3 is less than 3, whereas line 8 is not executed. We can make this more complex if we use an elif statement, and that is another evaluator to determine if whatever criteria we want. So if x equals 3, then we can say print x is equal to 3 there. So we can have additional criteria. Indeed, we could have many elif statements inside here if we had particular things to consider. So if we run this and just change x to be 3, just to see what happens. If my script will run, what we see that we have an error on line 5. So what has happened in line 7, should I say, is that we've tried to assign x as the value of 3. So this is incorrect. We want x to be evaluated against 3, which means you have to use the double equal sign. So this is not worked initially, but now it will work because there are 2 equals, which allows comparison. So let's rerun that. And what's happened is that it is printed out line 8, because that is evaluated as true. line 6 is not evaluated as true, and line 10 is not evaluated as true. So if we change it down to be -2, we see here now line 6 is printed out. That goes -2 is less than 3. If we change this to be 22, we expect line 10 to be printed out, which is what happens. If we change it to equal to 3.0, as expected, line 8 is printed out. So after line 8 is printed out, it skips down to line 12, the next line of code. What we can do is add in further criteria. So we can say y is equal to 55, and then we can say if x is equal to 3 and y is equal to 55, we can print out this statement. So here we've created a Boolean operator. So what will be evaluated here is that if x is equal to 3 and y is equal to 55, both evaluated as true, this line will be printed out. So let's try that. So here we see that line is indeed, on line 9, is indeed printed out. If we change this to y is equal to, let's say, less than 55, which we know is false, what happens now is that we get 3 is greater than or equal to 3 is printed out. Because this is our else condition, that's the only one that can be printed out because we know that x is greater than 3. But we don't know anything about y. So what we put in is another elif here. And we note that we just modified the indentation to be correct. So say if y is greater than or equal to 55, I should change this, less than, greater than or equal to 55. If we run this, we see that this line 11 is now printed out. If we change y to be 54 and run this, we see instead line 9 is printed out. If we change line 6, we can use other Boolean statements. So just change the print statement or y is greater than 53. And we run this now. What will happen is that this means that either condition can evaluate as true. If x is less than 3 or y is greater than 53, then this will be run out. Either one can evaluate as true. If we change it to and, then both must be true. What happens now is that we go back to this statement here because x is equal to 3, which is true, and y is less than 55, which is true. Our initial condition, x is not less than 3, even though y is greater than 53. So if we change x to be 2, now what we see is that line 7 is printed out because both these are true. And even if we had other conditions that were valid here, for example, the second one, if we run this, we still see that line 7 is printed out only because it skips all these lines if the first one evaluates as true and goes down to line 15. So even if these are true, they don't matter if the first criteria has been met. So if you're creating complex if-else structures, you need to think about the hierarchy for these. A final point here, when we're looking at this, is to think about nested if statements. So let's remove this complicated stuff and just think that we could have if statements within if statements. And let's say we're going to use x and y here again. We get an if statement saying if x is less than 3, and go inside to this if statement, which we're going to indent. If x is less than 3, and then if y is greater than 53, print x is less than 3 and y is greater than 53. Well, we can run this and see that this is actually printed out now. So you have a nested if statement. If x is 4, this will be false the first time it runs through, and nothing will be printed. We put an else statement, print x. Oh, wait, what? Is greater than or equal to 3. So we're going to else statement at the end there to say that 4 is greater than 3 for x. if we set x greater than 3, now this will go inside to the second stage on line 7 to see if y is greater than 53. If this is true, it will print this out. If this is not true, we can put in an else statement there for the y part, the nested component, and say print y is going to be less than or equal to 53. So let's run this. We see that this prints out line 8, but if you change y to be 52, what'll happen is that this else statement is printed out instead. So that's a nested if structure where we have this nested if within the first one. So that concludes our fundamentals of conditional statements in Python.